As usual, we gathered here today to listen to another dispensation of the Lord Buddha's teaching. We are ever so privileged, ever so fortunate to come across this Dhamma, the teaching of the Supremely Enlightened One, the Perfect One, the Omniscient One, the Undefeatable One, the Unvanquished One, the Perfect One. So before we commence, let us take a moment to recognize, reflect on and acknowledge that it is His Dhamma that we have this privilege of discussing, understanding. He is the Master. Bearing that in mind, let us all pay homage to the Supremely Enlightened Lord Buddha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Another week has gone by. You're a week older. When do you count your age? It's just on your birthdays? Because that's the only time you grow old, right? On your birthday. Rest of the time you're not aging. As you wait a year and then all of a sudden you've grown old by another year. It's not been happening through the course of the year, it just happens on that one day of the year. That's how we grow old, isn't it? Well, you know the truth. Another week has gone by. Another 7 days. That's 24 hours of 7. Or 7 lots of 24 hours. Many minutes have flung us by. Time is fleeting by and we don't even know it. Just look back at your past week. How did you spend your time? How much of what you did last week was for the purpose of extinguishing the fires of raga, dvesha, moha versus the time you spent indulging yourself in raga, dvesha, moha? Oh, I'm sure you have lots of excuses. But Swami Hansa, but someone came round, visitors, and I had no choice. I just had to go and talk to them about all the stuff I've been watching on TV. They forced me to go to the cinema with them. What can I do? Excuses, right? Now, isn't that so interesting? Oh, I catch you every time. Think. What are we doing? You've got to be more mindful than this. You've got to be more aware than this of what's going on. Buddhism is not the study about the universe. It's not study about the cosmos or how planets came into being. It's not a study about the Big Bang or anything like that. You know, at its core, Buddhism is nothing other than the study about oneself. It's a study about yourself. It's a study about who you are. It's a study about how you operate, how your mind functions, how your mind operates. And why, because of this ignorance of how you work, you get yourself into trouble so many times. This is what Buddhism is about. And to do that, you have to be mindful of how your mind works. If a sound comes from somewhere, why do you feel the urge to turn your head and look at it? Why do you feel the urge to find out what's going on? Why so much curiosity? You have to find some answers. You can't say just because. Well then, if you ask me, Swamin Hansa, why do I go to hell after this life? Well, I'm going to say just because. Is that all right? Then if you come and ask me, why do I suffer? Why am I always finding myself in stress and anxiety? I'm just going to say, well, just because. Is that a reasonable answer? Will you accept that from me? No. Well, if you don't accept that from me, then I think you should push yourselves a little bit harder. Don't do things just because. That's how we've been doing all these things in our lives. Throughout our lives, we've done a lot of things just because, have you not? It doesn't take a lot to turn back and look back at your past. A lot of things that you did just because, and look at where it got you. Now you're suffering the consequences of that. But when the consequences come and bite you on the back, well, they don't come and say just because. You can't turn them back and say, no, actually, you know what? I don't like you. Come back another day. Doesn't work like that. When it's time to bite you on the back, well, it's going to bite you back on the back real hard. So how was last week? I'll tell you what I did last week. About 6 or 7 hours a day was spent in meditation. Much of the rest of the time was spent discussing the Dhamma with my fellow monks at the monastery, or with other ladies and gentlemen like yourselves who come and visit the monastery, preaching to them or talking to them about the Dhamma. So I'm talking about my week, and you can think about what your week was like. Surely you must have done lots of interesting stuff. Far more interesting than how my week would have gone, right? I'm sure. And then there was time I put aside to attend to my requirements, such as the 4 hours I put into sleep nowadays. Actually, it's working pretty well. Remember when I decided I was going to cut down to 4 hours? It's when I met someone just like you. A young gentleman about the age of 35 who I met after one of the sermons. He was a 3-wheel driver. That's his profession. And he was telling me about what a busy life he has. He has a family to feed. He has a job to do. He moonlights whenever he can, which is to do a job during the night as well. Does overtime so he can make sure his children are looked after and they have a future for themselves. And then he says, but when I'm doing all of these things, I never forget to listen to the Dhamma. I always have my earphones plugged in, and I'm constantly listening to the Dhamma. Never missing a moment when I can do whatever I need to do to redeem myself from samsara. So when I was speaking to him, I was reminding myself, I'm doing pretty much the same things. So, we are pretty equal. Or so I thought. And then he said, so I only get about 4 hours sleep, Swaminathan. That was a jaw-dropping moment for me. I said, what? You do all that, and you can get away with 4 hours of sleep? That's all you need? He said, yes. At that moment, I confessed to him. I said, oh dear sir, I am so ashamed of myself. I don't do half the things you do to toil your body day and night, and I have to resort to 6 hours of sleep. And I find that pretty pathetic. So from that day, I changed my schedule. And actually, it's going pretty good. It's going pretty well. And I also have a group of young monks who come and meet me at 7 o'clock every morning. Actually, all 4 of these are in that group as well. So I do a personality development exercise with them. Because when they're out in the public and, going to schools and things like that, and living in society, you get that kind of exposure. How? Well, you get told off. That's how. When you make mistakes, you get beaten up. That's how society teaches you what's good and what's bad. But of course, their parents didn't bring them here to get told off or to get beaten up. So there are other means and then there are better ways of teaching young children how to work on their personality. This is not about creating a self and fostering the self, because that's the kind of personality that I used to learn when I was in society. How to build a good ego for yourself. They never said that that's what you were doing. But ultimately, Oh, well, we all know what we were doing. It was feeding our ego every single time. Every time you went on LinkedIn and sent an invite to somebody, you were extending your network. Why? I know so and so. So everyone else in your network knows now that you are connected. Woohoo. Another friend on Facebook, that's always a good addition, isn't it? Another connection, just so you can show you're connected to other people. All these things feeding our egos. And a lot of skills we learned, how to get the most from your customers, how to trick them, but them not even knowing that they're being tricked. So they said that was personality development, but underneath it was all about feeding the ego. So the program that we are doing at the monastery is very different to that. Every morning at 7 o'clock sharp, they have to be there, and I have a clock that I place by this Bodhisattva statue. And if they're a minute late, they have to go back. I will not accept them. Not a minute late. And when they arrive at 7 o'clock, they have to come clean shaven, having brushed and made their beds, and had breakfast, and all that, and have to be there 7 o'clock sharp. A minute late, turn back and go away. So 7 to 8 o'clock, there's a meditation program that I do with them, and then from 8 to 9:30, all the other monks in the monastery come and join us, and then we continue the meditation program. So this is how I make up my meditation. Like I said, it's about 6 to 7, 8 hours of meditation every day. So they help me and I help them. But that 7 to 8 in the morning, I dedicate for that group of young monks. So we have about 7 of them in the team for that at the moment. And you can ask them when you get a moment to speak to them. I'm not very lenient. I'm quite tough. If one makes a mistake, who has to suffer? Everyone, yes. If one makes a mistake, everyone has to suffer. The punishment is given to everybody. And the punishment involves doing things for the monastery, as well as the Sambuddhashasana, rendering a service of some kind. It could be sweeping the premises, whatever. And then everyone from time to time is given an opportunity to stand up on the stage and deliver what they understand about the Dhamma to the rest of the group. And then we pose questions. Difficult ones, not easy ones, not like the ones you ask me. We ask difficult questions. Questions that are intended to confuse them. Did I say I was ruthless? I'm not lenient, not with them. Because I want their parents to be proud of them. I want them to be proud of themselves, not through ego. I want them to understand where they have come, why they're here, what they're here to do, why they came into a robe, and what is the purpose of their lives. So these days they've got a project that they're working on. I've split the team in two. So I'm sharing these stories with you because I want you to consider how you spent your week. This is how I spent mine. And how your children might have spent their week. So we've split the team in two. And each team is expected to come up with 3 different ways of explaining and describing the doctrine, the Nyaya Dhamma. Right? Taking one from a Pruthagjana to a Sotapanna. The key doctrine, the fundamental principles of what one needs to understand to go from being a Pruthagjana to a Sotapanna. 3 different ways. And they have to be creative. So you can't just come up and talk about the same stuff that Guru Hamdanu talks in his sermons or what I've been talking about. You have to be creative. So they can use craft for that if they wish. They can come up with a drama or some kind of video. They can be as creative as they like. So they've been talking to me, over the past week they've come to me with some of the ideas that they've put together as a team. I'm quite impressed, I must say. Perhaps when they materialize, I'll bring them along on a Sunday and I'll ask them to present to you. Would you like that? Because one of those ideas have to be in English as well. That is one of the caveats. They have to present one of those ideas in English, and I'll give them an opportunity, or rather I'll give you an opportunity to listen to what they have to say. So we'll do that one Sunday when you're here. So these are some of the things I've been doing over the last week. So how was your week? You know, what I remind myself every day is, I used to do quite a lot of personality development and helping people do that in my lay life. How does one give a presentation? How does one negotiate? How does one communicate effectively with others? How to influence people? But a lot of the time, these things I taught and I helped people learn. But these were people who were not interested in the Dhamma. These were not people who were interested in Nibbana. They were people who were just either suppliers or consumers in this world of consumers and suppliers. So all they were interested was in ensnaring somebody else in their trap. That was all they were interested in. Yes, there might have been a little bit of merit, but now I think every word I say is hugely meritorious. It just happens to be because the purpose is entirely different. Chetanaham bhikkhave kammang vadami. It's the intention with which you do it, you say it. Now I know that there will be a lot of you here who do a lot, not just yourselves, but your families, to society, to help them prosper, and to help them become better citizens of tomorrow. I know that because you come and share those stories with me. And that's great. It's great to do that. And continue doing that. But make sure that in whatever you do, you find an opportunity to give them the gift of Dhamma. Because there is no other gift that excels that. The gift of Dhamma is the only gift that is really worthwhile giving. Every other gift is one that is just a means to an end. What about money? Isn't money a means to an end? How far will money take you? What's the answer? Up to the grave, absolutely. It can't take you any further than that. So isn't money a means to an end? What about property? Wealth? Houses? How far can that take you? Still the same answer, isn't it? What about youth? Imagine you can come up with some kind of formula which extends someone's youth, that helps someone maintain their good health, whatever the case might be. Ultimately, it's all a means to an end, because all that ends the day you get into that coffin, or the day you get put into that coffin. Can't think of the last time someone actually got into a coffin themselves. So it's all a means to an end, except for this one thing, the gift of Dhamma. The reason the gift of Dhamma excels all gifts is because it's a timeless gift. What's a timeless gift? Not a Rolex. The Dhamma is a timeless gift. Because this is a gift that was true back then, it's a gift that's true now, and it's a gift that is true forever. The only gift that is going to bring you your salvation. In Buddhist philosophy, there is no person to come and save you. There's no savior. The Dhamma is your savior. I'd like to share a story with you. There is a monk who lives with us, who was quite poorly over the last 2 or 3 weeks. And he was admitted in hospital for a duration of time. And all our monks visited him from time to time, just to make sure he was getting better and to wish him well. You'll see why I'm relating this story to you in a moment. So, he had a really tough time recovering. He was in the wards where they kept a very close eye because it was a serious case of not sure when might be his last breath. So it was that serious. But he's back with us now, he's recovered and he's recovering. But when he got back, he shared with me his time at the hospital, his experience there. He told me about how he witnessed, while he was in bed, a lot of people in neighboring beds passing away, a lot of them crying, weeping and trying to hold on to that last breath, but failing. And how sometimes their relations would come and surround them and cry in their face, "Oh, please don't go away. Who's going to feed me after you die?" Oh. If that's the last thing you've got to say, I mean, that's quite sad, isn't it? Who's going to feed me when you die? Who's going to take care of me when you die? So these were some of the things that he heard. But that's not the most interesting thing that he shared with me. He said, "Swamin Wahanse, it was great of you all to come and visit me at the hospital. And when you all came and stood around my bed and you wished me a speedy recovery, that was all good and well. But deep inside of me, I knew that there is nothing that any of you can do to save me right now. If it's my last moment, there is nothing that any of you can do. Atta Deepa Viharati. Anisarana, Anisarana. No one else can come to your refuge at that point in time. It's only the Dhamma." And he told me, just like I have heard other people have say, and I've heard in sermons delivered by monks over many sermons that I've listened to, there were times when he knew he had come very close. How so? He said he could see his entire life flash in front of him. Memories from childhood, memories that he never thought he had, flash in front of him. Just like watching a movie. Incidents from his childhood just flashing in front of him, one after the other. And times when in his life where he had succumbed to desire, raga, had succumbed to aversion, dvesha, had succumbed to delusion, moha, and acted through raga, dvesha and moha. As well as times where he had done meritorious deeds. He said experiences of when he was at the monastery, these events flashing in front of him like a train, one car after the other, just going like that. It's like a movie playing in front of his eyes, in so vivid detail. So when I heard this, it reminded me of having listened to sermons in the past where this is an experience that we all have to come across when it's our last moments alive. It's like a casino wheel. It'll spin until it comes and stops where you've got the pointer. All these events flashing in front of your eyes, all these events that you've gone through in life, experiences you've had, and it's going to stop at one point. The only problem is you can't decide which point it stops. Whether it's a good deed or a bad deed. You don't know, you can't tell. You just have to wait and watch and see what happens. And he said this was the experience that he had, and he knew it might be time for me to say farewell. But he said, at that point in time, he felt like the Buddha was there in front of him. And whatever event, whatever incident came flashing in front of his eyes, all that he could come to a conclusion was reject, reject, reject. So his mind was not clinging on to anything. Whether it was a deed that he had done through desire, it comes back into memory, comes alive. But at that point in time, It's as if the Buddha was standing in front of him and going, reject it. There's nothing to hold on to this. Nothing of value to hold on to. It's anicca dukkha anatta. This is not going to bring any pleasure. It's pointless. Let go. Second memory comes back. Again, same. Either good or bad, regardless. Whatever came to his mind, the only thing that happened, this is happening involuntarily. He said he even once tried to deliberately hold on to something, just to test what was really going on, because this was not an experience he had had in this life before. So he tried deliberately to hold on to something. He said, I was reminded of the monastery and all these young monks that I've been helping and teaching and giving instruction to. And that came to mind, and I thought, right, I'm going to hold on to this because, I've done good service to the monastery and I live with some good monks, so I must try and hold on to this. Even when he tried to do that, he still couldn't. Because the only answer that keeps coming back is reject. There's nothing worthwhile holding on to. And he realized this was his understanding of the Dhamma that had come to save him at that point in time. Dhammang have rakkati dhammachari. Dhammo have rakkati dhammachari. As he was relating this story to me, I could see a tear in his eye. And he said how he was so pleased with himself that he had taken the path in Dhamma. And at that point in time where no matter whatever he was trying to hold on to, nothing was being clung on to. Everything was just reject. No, nothing. It's not worthwhile. Just let go, let go, let go. And he wasn't even doing deliberately. It was all happening involuntarily. Because the Dhamma had come to his rescue. This is the only rescue you have. This is the only refuge you have. I want you to understand that. This is why I related that story with you. This is why he shared that story with me, and he said, Swami Nohansa, if anyone asks you, what might a near-death experience be like? Well, this is one. This is my personal experience. If you have sought refuge in the Dhamma, if you have an understanding, a comprehension of the Dhamma, then the Dhamma will come to seek to your refuge at that point in time, where no one else can help you at that point. No one else. You can't bring a Swami Nohansa and expect him to help you at that point in time, because who knows? You might be reminded of a time when you're in your youth, or perhaps in your time when you were foolish, where you might have offended a Swami Nohansa. So Swami Nohansa comes and he starts chanting Pirit. What you might be reminded of is a time when you were a young boy or a young girl. Mother said, Puta, come and listen to Pirit. I don't want Pirit. What nonsense is that? Stop that and put some music, will you please? You might be reminded of that. Now, are you not better off not having had that Swami Nohansa come and chant Pirit in front of you? This is the thing. You can't pick and choose at that point in time. You just have to let go and see what happens. It's just Russian roulette at that point. You can't pick and choose. At that point, you are just a victim of karma. So a question to you again. Have you been preparing yourself for that day? Or have you got lots of time for that? This Swami Nohansa was he's only 29 years of age. And remember, he's a Swami Nohansa. He's a monk who dedicates his life to the Dhamma. Perhaps you live more virtuous lives, maybe. So you have nothing to worry about. He is a monk who battles with Raga, Dvesha, Moha every waking hour of his day. Perhaps you have more vigor. Perhaps you are more courageous. Perhaps you are more tactful. So perhaps you have nothing to worry about. Maybe. If so, then great. But if not, I ask you again, what have you been doing to prepare yourselves for that day? This day that doesn't come with warning. When it comes, it comes.